It is my pleasure to introduce our very first speaker, who I think everyone will enjoy because he is a wonderful storyteller. Edward Alexander is the co-chair of the Gwich'in Council International and head delegation to the senior Arctic officials, including serving to two working groups, the Conservation of Arctic Flora and Fauna, CAF, and the Emergency Prevention, Preparedness, and Response working groups. Over his past 20 years, he served in a variety of leadership roles for the Gwich'in, and he holds a master's degree in secondary education and has fought as a wildland firefighter for 8 seasons. So that's actually how he put himself through university. Edward knows much about the land of the Gwich'in country, much about the North and the boreal forest, and he knows a lot about fire. So it's my pleasure to welcome Ed to us today so we can learn a bit about what's happening in Alaska, in the Yukon, in the Northwest Territories, and the Gwich'in country. So over to you, Ed.
And Wasi Cho, Jessica, it's an honor to be with all of you here today. As Jessica mentioned, I'm the head of delegation for Gwich'in Council International, which represents all Gwich'in people of Alaska, the Yukon Territory, and the Northwest Territory to the Arctic Council. And that may not be enough of a description because folks don't really have a firm idea about who Gwich'in people are. And so I wanted to share a little map here. And so on this map, you can see our homeland in Alaska, the Yukon Territory, and the Northwest Territory. And so we're in northeastern Alaska, northern Yukon Territory, and then in the north of the Northwest Territories as well. And it's over quite a large span of area. And just wanted to give you everybody kind of a reference point for the things that that I view as really important, which is Gwich'in homelands. And the main thing that we've been working on in the Arctic Council for the last several years now is raising the profile of wildland fire. And so Gwich'in people have had a unique experience with wildland fire in the Arctic, in that we've had huge amounts of wildland fire in our homeland. And we've really had to rethink what it means, what's occurring in our environment. Jessica mentioned storytelling. You know, there's kind of like, there's an old adage that there's only two stories in the world. One is a stranger comes to town, and then the other is somebody goes on a journey. Well, the stranger that came to town for us was wildland fire at the scale we haven't seen before. And that required Gwich'in people to go on a journey to try and unite the Arctic governments around the world to think more clearly about wildland fire and the implications, the consequences of what it means when the pyrocene meets the cryosphere, and what that means for our collective future. And so, you know, there's a real danger in narratives, though, to get lost, right? There's a danger for all of us to get lost. And one of the things that we've seen repeatedly, you know, from Southern folks is that, you know, when they don't know something about the North, they fill the North with their imagining, with their fantasies, right? It becomes the land of Santa Claus. The North becomes the land of elves, becomes the dark forest, the empty forest. You know, we get even the word Arctic is something from Southern lands. It's not, you know, something from the North. And what's the danger of that? What's the danger of Southern imaginings on the North? The danger is that it displaces what's actually occurring. It displaces the reality of what's occurring, the reality of what's there. And that reality is that the boreal forest is the largest forest on planet Earth. That reality is that this is the world's largest biome. It's the largest terrestrial carbon sink on planet Earth. Beneath this forest that I grew up in, we also have permafrost and yedema, and it has, you know, more than twice the amount of carbon and methane than in the atmosphere collectively today. And so we have to think about what's the reality of the North. The reality is most people have never seen a language map. They have never seen the indigenous peoples of the North. They have never seen the reality of wildland fire in the North. They have never seen how all of these intersect, right? And so we have to, it's a unique challenge. And so, that's one of the reasons why Gwich'in Council International started wildland fire projects in the Emergency Preparedness, Prevention, and Response Working Group, and with the Conservation of Arctic Flora and Fauna Working Group. And we're proud to be co-lead for the new Norwegian Wildland Fire Chairship Initiative. Is because there's unique challenges with wildland fire. We can't just assume that we know what's going to happen. We can't assume that we have things under control. And and I wanted to show you guys this other map here too, because it gives you an image of what's happened to my homeland. This is an image of the Yukon Flats over the last 50 years, and we can assume a lot of things about this map. We can say, well, there's a lot of fire occurring, right? But then we would also miss the picture that these unique challenges is not just in the volume of fire, but also the economy, right? So every one of these burn scars is affecting somebody's trap line and their economic livelihood. It's affecting hunting grounds and food security. It's affecting community health. It's affecting a wide variety of things. Each one of these fires has like tendrils that reach out, but they don't just impact one thing. It sort of sends out challenges on all sides. And so we can't fill those in with imaginings. We have to fill them in with the best knowledge that we have. And then we also have to start asking questions. What's going on with this, right? What's happening? Why are we seeing a map like this? What is the scale of a map like this? The area that's highlighted in light yellow is an area the size of the U.S. state of Maryland. The areas that have burned in red are equivalent to the area of 4 Delawares. And so when you have massive, massive burning, and Fort Yukon, to center that map, is just north of the Arctic Circle. So when you have massive burning like this, it kind of asks the question, what's happened? 25 years ago, fire weather in the north was predictable. And as wildland firefighters, we were trained on cloud identification, wind speed determination by vegetation movements, field humidity tests. But now things have changed. They've changed a lot. Let me see if I can pull this map down now. Fire weather has changed and for the worst. We now have lightning increasing on Empyrean in places in the north that it hasn't in the past. Storms are increasing. We've seen pyrocumulonimbus clouds in the north, which can send smoke and ash into the troposphere, possibly even the stratosphere. We've seen spot fires occurring far distances from wildland fires in the north. We've seen dry lightning. We've seen widespread fires with downward winds causing unpredictable fire behavior. And we're seeing things that are sourced adequately at locations. We're seeing a dense smoke up here, and it doesn't dissipate. And it can fill up large regions in the north and travel far distances, right? We've seen that this summer with all of the Canadian fire. Am I back? Okay. I think I got kicked out for a second there.
You are back. We can hear you.
Okay. And so, it has this international effect. which is why we're able to kind of raise the profile among these states and permanent participants at the Arctic Council, but it also has like localized effects. So all of the smoke itself affecting the forest, right? Anybody who's ever had a fish cache knows that smoke aids in drying out that fish, right? We put all of our fish in that smokehouse and it dries it out. And the same thing is occurring here in these northern forests. All the smoke in the atmosphere is drying out the forest itself, prepping it to burn essentially. And so, we see like these widespread effects from fire. We've seen food security issues of all sorts from fire, from hunting grounds being burned or made inaccessible due to trails being destroyed or being too smoky to hunt, or to planes not being able to reach these remote northern communities. Most people in the South aren't aware that the North, many Gwich'in communities in the North are not on the road system, and so they don't have access to regular food sources other than what's they hunt and fish or what's brought in by plane. And then there's all kinds of health issues, right? Mental health issues, trauma. One of the things that we've been talking about recently, I had a discussion with the mayor of Yellowknife recently about the trauma from this summer's wildland fires and what it means for her community and what it means for the youth in that community, the having to flee from your home. 70% of the Northwest Territory had to evacuate from their homes this summer due to wildland fire in the north. And so um, and that can be underestimated in southern areas where economic cycles are different. And if you're in Los Angeles or if you're in Texas, you can build things year round. Your construction season is 12 months a year. The construction season in Yellowknife is not 12 months a year. The economic engine is not 12 months a year. And so, it's something that's really important to kind of consider is that these economic troubles with wildland fire, the loss of tourism, a lot of these things really are not well explored. And then how we cooperate on wildland fire as a whole. And so I think that all of these things we have to really consider more sharply. We have to have a better understanding about what's happening with wildland fire in the north because it's occurring with much greater frequency. It's occurring with much more devastating impact, whether that's what we've seen in Fort McMurray or Yellowknife or the evacuation of Old Crow, a Gwich'in community this summer, or the widespread smoke impacts we've seen across the north. And so, Gwich'in Council International has been really trying to raise the profile of what's happening with wildland fire in the Arctic for some time now. About the last 6 years or so, we've been working, trying to get nation states to examine how their wildland fire agreements work or don't work, how they should be improved, how we need to increase what we're doing scientifically, the need to fund fire ecologists, climatologists, cartographers, getting a better idea about the mapping of wildland fire in the north, getting a better understanding about the impacts to indigenous peoples, but also not just looking at wildland fire as something that needs to be suppressed, but also something that we have a history with, right? What's the history of our people with wildland fire in the Arctic? How can we utilize wildland fire? So not just from a suppression standpoint, but what's the nature of cultural burns? What's the history behind Sami uses of fire, Inuit uses of fire, Gwich'in uses of fire. In the early spring, Gwich'in burn meadows and lake bed areas um, to help us ease travel through dense grass. But there's still snow in the forest at this time, and so it doesn't catch the forest on fire, but it burns these areas in this Yukon Flats that are um, really the generators of life in that area. So really increasing the amount of muskrat and rabbits and the health of moose because the land is fertilized, right? And so I just point this out so that we realize that fire doesn't have to be just this destructive force, that it can be something that's done uh, protect the forest. It can be done in a way that helps increase biodiversity. It can be done in a way that helps to really promote life and cooperation in the North. And so I really wanted to kind of emphasize those things. It's we can't just let the story be told in the South for wildland fire in the North. We have to have a broad understanding of the communities in the North, and that only happens when we sit together. And I know we have some excellent speakers for the rest of our time today, and I just really appreciate being here with you all, and so honored to spend some time with you. And I'll leave it there. Masit Cho.
Masicho Ed, thank you so much. We do have one question for you in the Q&A, and then we'll move on to Jan Boulanger. I'll turn it over to Villebecco.
Yes, so there's one question that what is the healthy, sorry, what is the healthy fire return interval and size for that area?
I don't think I understand that question. That sounds like like a scientific type of fire ecologist question.
Right.
I'm not a scientist. I think that'll be some kind of question for Jessica or somebody else. But
I'm sure maybe a better way of framing that, because in the spirit of what you said, because I think scientists do need to take this to heart. I'm sure the Gwich'in and all of the indigenous peoples of the North understand the fire comes back onto the landscape every so often, and that there's a healthy time between that, but it's maybe not measured in exact years, or right. It's more of a it should come, you know, at so many times during your lifetime. You should see this. It will return. I don't know. Ed, do you have any thoughts on that?
okay, so I understand what you're saying now. Yeah, I think one of the things people have to realize is that the landscape as a whole is changing in the Arctic, right? In the Yukon Flats, and so before you might see like a forest burn, and then it would return as the same forest, right? It would return as spruce forest, and it would be like another. So for example, my homeland, my where my family is from, is this place called Shotang, which is the Happy Hill. So we're actually called Shulgajam, the happy people. And in that area, there was a fire in 1947, and it burned the area, and it returned in about 30 years as the same spruce forest that it was. Now, the area that's around it started burning in the late 90s, and then it burned again, and it burned again, right? And so now it's grassland, and so it's not the same type of forest, or it's coming back as a deciduous forest, like with aspen, like quaking aspen in it, and then the aspen themselves are unhealthy, right? They're not healthy trees. We see widespread bugs in those trees, and so they're leaf miners. So the trees aren't actually green. The leaves are silver, right? And so that's like it's an interesting question, because it's like people can assume that, oh, well, these deciduous trees are going to come in and they trap even more carbon than other trees, using this kind of southern thinking. That might be true in the South, where quaking aspen grow to be really large and tall, and people say, well, what's the difference? Well, quaking aspen in the Yukon Flats can grow to they're like this, and a spruce tree grows, can grow quite large. And so just the amount of carbon that those two trees are pulling in is vastly different. And our forests, our spruce forests, are by and large healthy, except for with some spruce beetle invasions that are starting to now come in. But these aspen forests that are coming after, I think it's probably visible from space, and that's one of the things that I've talked about with some people who do remote monitoring and stuff like that. It's like, well, maybe we should look at some of these quaking aspen and look at how silver they are from the space, and so we can get an idea about what's actually occurring with them, right? Because they're obviously not growing as well as they used to. So
Well,
I don't know if
Ed,
that
let me say, I will volunteer some NASA Ames folks to work with you on that. We were happy to try
that's
to
wonderful.
get at the spectral signature, the quaking aspen for sure. Yes.
This is how the sausage gets made, folks. Appreciate it,
Exactly.
Jessica.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you. And with that, we're going to, and it's a great transition because now we've